You're listening to School Leadership Reimagined, Episode 24.
Welcome to the School Leadership Reimagined podcast, where we rethink what's possible to transform your school. If you're tired of settling for small wins and incremental improvement, then stay tuned to discover powerful and practical strategies for getting every teacher in your school moving towards excellence. Now, here's your host, Robin Jackson.
Hey builders, welcome to another episode of School Leadership Reimagined. I'm your host, Robin Jackson, and today we're going to talk about delegation. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to take a good look at your to-do list right now. Take a look at everything that you have to do for the rest of the week, and I want you to ask yourself a question. How many of those tasks on your to-do list could and should be done by somebody else? I bet you have at least one. And that's because as educators, we often make terrible delegators. And yet, if you're going to do the work that's really important, the work that only you can do, well, you need to delegate. And you probably knew that already, right? So why don't we delegate more? What's stopping us? In my work with school leaders, I've discovered that there are really two big barriers to delegation. And the first one is that many of us have tried in the past to delegate, but we found that, if you want something done right, you need to do it yourself. Or you've tried to delegate and it took so long for you to explain to somebody else what you wanted them to do that it just would have been faster if you just done it yourself in the first place. Well, today you're going to learn how to overcome both of these obstacles and finally get some things off of your to-do list. That's right. Today, you're going to learn how to delegate like a builder. But before we dive in, I want to talk to you about another big problem that I see a lot of builders facing this time of the year. You know how you start the year and you're so full of plans and everything feels promising and you're like, this year is going to be the year that I finally make the difference that I've been trying to make. And about now in the year, you're starting to think to yourself, you know what? Maybe not. You're not seeing any progress. You're losing momentum. And you almost wonder if you might make better progress towards your goals if only people would cooperate. And I get it. I mean, it's really hard to maintain momentum throughout the year when you have people who are dragging their feet or people who aren't fully invested in reaching your goals. And that's why you really need to come to Builders Lab 2019. Because at Builders Lab 2019, we're going to take a good look at where you are right now in the year, and we're going to figure out how do we get your staff recommitted and taking real action to achieving the goals that you set at the beginning of the year, and how can you actually move everybody towards achieving your goals this year. At Builders Lab, you're going to learn the 4 things that you need to do to get your staff moving consistently towards your school goals. You're going to learn how to overcome toxic cultures and build a more positive culture where everybody's treating everybody else with respect and everybody's kind of aligned and focused and committed towards your goals. And then once you've gotten your culture straight, then you're going to learn how to give your teachers the kind of feedback that they need, that they'll actually act on, and they'll accept your feedback without a whole bunch of pushback or hurt feelings or blank stares. And then once you've gotten that straight, the next step is that you're going to learn how to provide follow-up and support for teachers and help them consistently move and improve throughout the year. And finally, you're going to learn how to help teachers stay accountable for their part in achieving school goals without having to resort to, writing people up or having really tense, awful conversations with teachers. So you do those 4 things, and then this year doesn't have to be a wash. You see, there's still time to get people on board and to make a difference in your school this year. And you can learn how to do that by coming to Builders Lab. So what I want you to do is right now, go to mindstepsinc.com/builder-lab. Even if you have to pause this podcast in order to do it, we'll still be here when you get back. But go to mindstepsinc.com/builders-lab and get your ticket. And then let's figure out together how we get your people moving in the right direction with momentum, with passion, so that you can achieve your goals this school year. All right. Let's talk about delegation. And I should admit right off the bat that this is something that I struggle with too. And I think the main reason that a lot of us struggle with delegation is because we tell ourselves that, it's just easier to do it ourselves. Well, let's unpack that idea a little bit because is it really easier to do it yourself? I mean, on the surface, it may seem so. I mean, by the time you explain how you want something done to somebody else, you probably could have done it already. But that's really short-sighted thinking because, sure, you could have done it yourself faster than explaining it to someone else. But if it's a recurring task, well, if you don't invest the time explaining it to somebody else, then you have to do it over and over and over again. But if you do invest that time, you never have to do that task again. So if it's like a 5-minute task and it has to be done once a week, then over a year, you would spend, 260 minutes that throughout the year doing that task over and over and over again. And, what's that in hours? It's like 4.5 hours. So if it takes you less than 4.5 hours to explain it to somebody else or show somebody else how to do it, and then you never have to do that task again, then you're saving yourself time by just investing that time up front. So here's another myth that we have. We think that no one can do the job as well as we can do it. That if you want something done right, you need to do it yourself kind of idea. Well, first of all, it's not entirely true because most tasks that are worthy of delegation are things that somebody else can do as well, if not better, than you can do. But second of all, you need to ask yourself, if it's not perfect, if it's close to being perfect, is that enough? For instance, maybe no one else can set up the teacher appreciation breakfast table as well as you can. You've got the doily, Jean. You know exactly how it's going to be arranged so it's beautiful and pretty, but, so what? I mean, is that the best use of your time setting up a table? Or should you be at the door personally greeting teachers and deepening your relationships and socializing instead of worrying about, is the table perfect? Could a less perfect table still convey your appreciation? Do people even really care? Or here's another one. Maybe nobody can do a data table like you can with the colors and the formatting. But, even if you're an Excel beast, could somebody else create a table for you that is almost as good and still conveys the data so that you could spend your time going through the data rather than tinkering with the formatting so that the table's pretty? I mean, the point is this myth has a ton of ego built into it. In most cases, you can usually train somebody to do the task as well or better than you can. So shouldn't you invest the time up front to teach somebody else how to do certain tasks as well or better than you can so that you can focus your time and energy on the things that only you can do? So a lot of times we run into this myth because we don't know how to delegate. But if we understood how to delegate properly, this wouldn't even be an issue. There's another myth about delegation that we have as educators that, it really needs to go. And that's this. We don't want to delegate because we don't want to come across as being authoritarian. Cut that out. It's not rude to ask somebody to do some work so that you can focus on the work that's important for you to do. And if you delegate it the right way, people will be honored to take work off of your hands. In fact, really all of these myths, all of these issues, they evaporate when you delegate the right way. So let's talk about how to delegate the right way. And the first thing that you need to understand if you want to delegate the right way is that there are actually about 6 different levels of delegation. And before you delegate a task, the first thing you need to decide is you need to be clear about what level of delegation you are using so that everybody's clear about what's expected for them. So level 1 delegation is basically do as I say. And that means that you're going to tell someone exactly what to do and then expect them to do it exactly as you told them. So this level of delegation means that you'll have to think through the task in detail ahead of time, and you'll have to figure out what must be done, how it must be done, when must it be done, and then you tell that person exactly what to do and expect them to do it exactly as you specify. So, for instance, you may give someone the exact template you want them to use for the parent newsletter, or the exact way that you want your file set up. There's no room for improvisation here. They need to do it exactly like you told them. So I remember, I wanted my secretary to set up my files. And so I gave her a written checklist, an order that I wanted things put into my files. And then I gave her a sample file set up exactly like I wanted it that she could use as an example. And when I did that, I set her up for success. I showed her one time. She had the checklist. She had the example file. She didn't need to come ask me questions. And when I went in my files, they were done like I wanted them to do. You could do the same thing. The thing is, if you know that you want something done in a particular way, this is a good way to delegate. But don't leave it to somebody when actually you have some ideas about how it should be done, or you have a specific way you want it to be done. Make that clear up front. Show people how to do it. Set people up for success, and then it's not a problem. Okay, so that's level 1 delegation. Level 2 is a little bit different. Level 2 is what I call the look into this level. That means that you really want somebody to do some research on a task and then give you several options. And then once you have the options, you will decide how you want to proceed next. For instance, if you're looking for a caterer for a staff luncheon, you could delegate that task and have somebody research and give you 3 options, and then you decide on the final option. Or if you're looking for a new English teacher, you could set very clear criteria for what you're looking for. And then you could have the English department chair look through resumes that you've received and cull the list down to 4 or 5 finalists. And then they can give those finalists to you, and you can look through those resumes. Now, here's the important part. If there's no clear criteria, it's really not something you can delegate. But if you have people aligned around your core values, then they can look for people who are not a fit and at least remove those people and bring the people that fit and align with those core values on a preliminary level first as a starting point. And that saves you tons of time reading resumes that aren't right and helps you focus on the resumes that are right. At this level of delegation, you have to be really, really clear about your criteria. But once you are clear, you can trust someone else to do the early legwork and then bring you their recommendations based on your criteria, and then you can make a final decision. It can save you a ton of time. So that's level 2. Now, level 3 delegation is what I call give me your advice and I'll decide. And that means that you want someone to explore the various options and then make a recommendation to you as to what they think the best option is, but you make the final decision. So, for instance, suppose you're looking for a reading program. You can set very clear criteria for that program and have a person or a committee do the research and the legwork and then bring you the program that they believe is the best fit. And after they make their case, you make the final decision. So that's level 3. Level 4 delegation is when you say explore, decide, and then check with me. So notice how each level of delegation, you're giving more and more responsibility to the delegatee. I don't know, I just made that word up. So I don't even know if that's an existing word, but let's go with it today, right? So you are giving more and more responsibility and ownership and authority to the delegatee. Okay, so level 4 is explore, decide, check with me. And that means that you want them to figure out the best way to do something and simply check in with you to make sure it's okay before proceeding. So for instance, you could delegate the lunchroom coverage schedule to somebody else. They work out the schedule, they show it to you for your final approval, and then they begin implementing it. And what this does is it gives you a chance to weigh in, but it doesn't get you bogged down with having to figure things out for yourself. Level 5 delegation is explore and decide within these limits. And that means you want them to figure it out on their own and then make a decision within certain constraints. Now, this one's a little bit harder to do because it means that you leave the final decision to somebody else. And this is a great way to develop other builders in your building, but you have to do it right. I mean, first of all, you have to be okay with giving somebody else the final decision. And the way that you can be okay with giving somebody else the final decision and letting go of some of that power is that you invest first in making sure that you have some clear criteria in place and clear boundaries in place up front. And this is the part that most people skip. And it's also what creates a lot of the issues around this level. So for instance, you might want to delegate a professional development day to your instructional coach. Then the instructional coach goes off, they plan a whole day. And then when you see the plans, you're like, this isn't quite what I wanted. I mean, we need to be focusing on this, not that, or I wanted something more interactive or, whatever, I mean, has that ever happened to you before? You try to delegate to someone, you leave it up to them, they do something entirely different than what you had in mind, and you have to go back and be like, oh no, this isn't what I wanted. And then you just decide, what, I'm not going to delegate anymore. Well, the reason that happens is because you didn't take enough time on the front end to make things clear. And you really need to do that. What's your expectation? What are the boundaries? For instance, I was working with a grade level team once, and they were planning this cross-curricular unit. And I was sitting in on their team meetings, and I was just getting way too involved in the whole thing. And it was getting frustrating for them. And, I could see that. So I was getting frustrated too, because I was working on this project instead of working on the work that I really needed to be working on. And so finally I said, look, this isn't working. I tell you what, let's sit down and come up with some parameters around this project. Once we do, I'm going to leave it to you. So we agreed on some parameters around the project, like, the project couldn't take more than 3 weeks. It had to be aligned with the curriculum standards. It had to have a capstone experience that encompassed the 4 core subjects, and it couldn't cost more than $500 total. And there probably were a few more that I can't remember right now, but you get the point. We set parameters. Well, guess what? The project was a huge success. And guess what else? I didn't have to touch it. But this is what I really like about this level of delegation. You empower people to take on more ownership, more leadership, but you don't do it in a way that sets them up for failure. You actually set them up for success. And when you do that, then you can trust people to go out and do that work and know that it's going to be done the way you need it to be done. So that's level 5. We've got one more level, and that's level 6 delegation. And level 6 delegation is take care of it for me. That means that you want somebody else to do everything and deliver the results that you're after, and you don't want them to have to check in with you along the way. Again, this one's hard to do, and you wouldn't do it for everything, but it can be really useful if you're trying to develop the buildership of others on your team. So again, if you're going to do this, you have to make sure that first of all, you're both in agreement around your core values, your mission, and your vision. If you don't have that agreement, this level is really hard to do. And if you're worried about how do we get agreement around the core values, I'll link to an earlier episode we did around core values that talks about how you establish them. I'll link to that in the show notes. But once you have that agreement, then you can trust others to carry out those core values, that mission, that vision, without needing to micromanage people along the way. So let me give you a really simple, kind of really basic example so you can see how all 6 of these levels of delegation work. Okay, suppose you want your secretary to make travel arrangements for you so that you can come to Builders Lab 2019. Hint, hint. So level 1 delegation, it means that you would investigate the flights and the hotels yourself, and then you'd give her exactly what you want your itinerary to look like, and then her job would simply be to make the reservations, type everything up on the itinerary, and give it to you. That's level 1 delegation. Level 2 delegation means that you want her to do some research and then send you a list of flight options and hotel options, and then you pick the one that works best for you. And once you pick, you tell her what you want, and then she books it for you. Level 3 delegation means that you would ask her to look at all the various options, send you what she came up with, but highlight the ones that she thinks would be the best for you, the best itinerary for you. And then once you agree to it, then she makes the reservations. But if you don't agree to it, you can tell her what you prefer instead. That's level 3. Level 4 delegation means that you ask her to come up with whatever the best itinerary is for you and then check with you before she actually makes the final reservations. So you don't look at all the options, anything. You just say, look at all the options, figure out which one is the best for me, and then you say yay or nay on that one. Level 5 delegation means that you ask her to make all of your reservations for you, and there's no need to check in with you first as long as she remembers that you only want direct flights and you only want to stay at Marriott hotels. And as long as she can create an itinerary within those boundaries or those guidelines, you're happy. She doesn't need to talk to you at all. And then level 6 delegation means that she figures out what she thinks is the best itinerary for you. She makes all the reservations, and when she's done, she just sends you a completed itinerary and says, hey, this is what you need to do, and you just follow directions. That's kind of how I delegate my own travel here at MindSteps, but that comes after years of working on those parameters. And here's the point. The idea is that if you can figure out what level of delegation you want before you assign the task, then you can be very clear about what you need done, and you're more likely to actually get what you want out of the process. Okay, so once you figure out what level of delegation you need, the next step is that you need to figure out what resources does that person, your delegatee, my word again, need in order to complete the task successfully? So do they need your travel rewards membership number? Or do they need an itinerary template to follow? Or do they need a checklist? And, what you want to do is you want to figure out, okay, if I'm going to delegate this to somebody, what are the resources that they need in order to be successful? So remember my earlier example with my secretary, I gave her a checklist. I gave her an example file so that she wouldn't have to ask me any questions. It's not like I didn't want her asking me any questions, but I was trying to set her up for success so she could complete the task on her own. Because here's the thing, if you delegate something to somebody and then they have to keep coming back to you to get resources, then they keep drawing you back into the work. You haven't really given the work to them. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that they're equipped with all the resources they need. So think about that ahead of time so you can set them up for success by giving them the resources that they need. So you figure out the level of delegation, you give people the right resources. And the next thing you need to do is, if you have any limits around the task, you need to tell that to people up front. For instance, is there a budget limit or a time limit? Are there certain criteria that you have for completion of the task? Any limits that you have, make them clear to people as you're delegating the task. So figure out the level of delegation, make sure people have what they need, make sure you're clear about any limits. And finally, you need to let them know what the criteria is for success. Now, what I mean by that is you need to let people know, what does successful completion of the task actually look like? How will they know when they've been successful? Because when they have that criteria, they can always compare that criteria to the current performance. And if they're not hitting if they're not hitting those criteria, they can adjust before you have to look at it. So that way you don't have to help people adjust. They can make their own adjustments and then deliver a successful performance. There's one more thing that you should probably include, and that's this. You should tell people when they should contact you. For instance, back to your secretary. If your secretary can't find a flight that meets your criteria, then should she call you with other options, or should she just kind of make an executive decision? You have to let her know so that she can figure out what to do if she runs up against that. If somebody runs into a roadblock, should they bring it to you? And when should they bring it to you? You need to be clear about that so that you don't get people interrupting you along the way, or you don't get people, making, decisions in the midst of the process that you really want to be involved in. The idea here is this: you need to be as clear as possible. And that way you can successfully delegate tasks and be confident that they'll actually get done to your specifications. Once you get used to delegating this way, you're going to find that delegating will get a lot easier and that you'll free yourself up to focus on the work that only you can do. And you won't be so overwhelmed because you'll be delegating successfully to other people who can get the task done. And again, that way you can focus on the work that only you can do. So I'll just review one more time those 6 levels of delegation just so that you can have them. Level 1 delegation is basically do as I say. Level 2 is look into this. Level 3 is give me your advice and I'll decide. Level 4 is explore, decide, and check with me. Level 5 is explore and decide, but within these limits, don't check with me. And level 6 is take care of it for me. Now, here's the thing. You don't need to delegate everything. That's called abdication, not delegation. But you probably need to delegate far more than you do right now. And that's because you need to really carve out time and space to focus on the things that are within your zone of genius, the things that only you can do, rather than waste your time and energy on things that others could be doing as well or, frankly, better than you can. So right now, I want you to go through all the things that you have on your plate right now and ask yourself, for each thing, is this something I really should be doing, or is this something that I can delegate? And then I want you to take those tasks and I want you to delegate those tasks like a builder. Now, before we go, don't forget to get your ticket to Builders Lab 2019. If you want to find out how to get your people on board and moving this year so that you can reach your goals this year, I'm talking about even the resistant people, the naysayers, the people who are just plain stuck, the people who are dragging their feet, you need to come to Builders Lab 2019. Just go to mindstepsync.com. mindstepsinc.com/builders-lab. That's mindstepsinc.com/builders-lab and get your ticket now. Okay, next time I'm going to tackle a couple of questions that some of you sent me on LinkedIn. And by the way, thank you so much for sending me those questions on LinkedIn, because I want to make sure I'm tackling obstacles that are real. And so next week, we're going to tackle a few questions that people have been asking me on LinkedIn. And a lot of these questions have to do with the same basic principle. And that's this: you're a school leader. You have a real sense of urgency, but change is taking a long time, and you're starting to see a little bit of progress, but it's not going as quickly as you want. You want to make sure that you're being a builder, but sometimes you just want to make a decision. You just want to, draw a line and get people moving. You don't want to be a bully and start issuing orders, but you're kind of frustrated with how slowly people are moving. If that's you, then you need to be here next time, where we're going to be talking about how to handle the messy middle and create that sense of urgency. And we're going to show you how to do it like a builder. That's all for today. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the School Leadership Reimagined podcast. For show notes and free downloads, visit schoolleadershipreimagined.com. School Leadership Reimagined is brought to you by MindSteps, Inc., where we build master teachers.